welcome to you. I want to remove the word warm because it's very hot and our welcome is not entirely cool. However, I welcome to you on behalf of the India International Center and the Raza Foundation. This is the 9th session in our series Gandhi Matters. I have been seeing a video, which I don't know how it comes to me, and it's very interesting. There are two persons, young men. One of them has a shoe in his hand, the other one has a chappal. And there is a statue of Gandhiji, and both of them are slapping him with shoe and chappal. This was one which was going on. And I got another one today in which Girish Karnad's photograph and a series of chappals around him. So we are living in very interesting times for people who dare to speak, people who dare to dissent, people who dare to question. This series, we had very eminent scholars coming and speaking, Ashish Nandi, James Douglas, Sudhir Chandra, Ramin Jahabegalu, etc. And today we have NEERA CHANDHOKE. The next 3 sessions, in July we have Kumar Gandhar's daughter, Kalapini Komkali, come and sing Gandhi Malhar, a rag which Kumarji had created way back when Gandhiji's centenary was celebrated. And Subbarao, who has been associated with some kind of a music, so Gandhi and music kind of a thing. That will be on July 18th. On August 21st, Deepankar Gupta, another eminent academic, will be coming and talking. In September 20th, we have 3 eminent visual artists who have used Gandhian motifs in their work. That is Ghulam Muhammad Sheikh, Atul Dodia and Riaz Komu. We are hoping to continue this series up to 30th January 2020. So we are going to extend it because the good presence of audience and the response we have been getting, we are encouraged that in spite of whatever is happening, there is a continuing and perhaps a growing interest in Mahatma Gandhi. Our speaker this evening is, of course, a very eminent professor, and although the term has become a little, shall we say, controversial, a public intellectual, in the sense that she has spoken loudly, although not necessarily loquaciously, on current issues and has written about them. She has been a professor of political science in the University of Delhi, a visiting fellow at the Center for the Study of Law and Governance in JNU. Okay, incidentally, honored 2 ex-JNU students the other day as the very eminent alumni who have got into the cabinet. Although that perhaps in JNU might not be thought to be such an honor. Then she has lectured in Goethe University, and Louis University, Rome, Italy, and Center for Civil Society, London School of Economics. She was awarded the Gaetano Mosca Fellowship, whatever that means, and she has been a Nehru National Fellow. She has written on various aspects of contemporary polity. And today she's going to talk about non-violence. But as I was thinking of this, I came across a little book which had very interesting quotations, cryptic ones from Gandhi on non-violence. So I propose to read them out to you and to warm you up. Where there is only a choice between cowardice and violence, I advise violence. I am not pleading for India to practice non-violence because she is weak. I want her to practice non-violence being conscious of her strength and power. No training in arms is required for realization of her strength. I believe non-violence is infinitely superior to violence, forgiveness more manly than punishment. Violence is bred by inequality, non-violence by equality. We can only win over the opponent by love, never by hate. Hate is the subtlest form of violence. Hatred endures the hater, never the hated. Pure, unmixed non-violence is impossible as Euclid's line. Just as arms symbolize violence, the charkha symbolizes non-violence. In the sense that we can most directly realize non-violence through it, but it cannot symbolize non-violence so long as we do not work in accordance with this spirit. And of course you know it. Historically, when Gandhiji was talking about non-violence, the most violent era of the 20th century was happening in terms of what was being done by Hitler in Germany, by Mussolini in Italy, and later it turned out, without our knowing perhaps, by Stalin in Soviet Union. So in a period which was marked by genocides on a very wide scale, here was a half-naked fakir talking of violence and leading one of the most decisive struggles against one of the most powerful empires of the world. NEERA, CHANDHOKE.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashok. Thank you for inviting me to this to speak at this series of very distinguished lectures. The title of my paper, my presentation, is Negating Violence, the Gandhian Way. Now, I must confess, I am a bit of a fan of detective fiction, which Bertrand Russell said is the only form of fiction worth reading. So let me start with a murder story. At a meeting of the Indian National Association held at the Imperial Institute, London, on 1st July 1909, a murder happened. The assassin was a young Indian, a Punjabi. I looked in vain for some Punjabi who was a part of politics before 1940, and I finally found one in Madan Lal Dhingra, not entirely commendable. And the victim was a political aide-de-camp to the Secretary of State for India, Sir William Curzon Wiley. And actually, Dhingra, there is some story that Dhingra thought he was killing Lord Curzon, and he ended up killing the aide-de-camp. Hailing from a very propertied and a very influential family in Amritsar, Dhingra had come to London to complete a degree in engineering. He was a very mediocre student, and that is what I want to focus on, because when we come to the letters that he writes, V.N. Datta has argued that he could not possibly have written all that. He had practically completed his education, and he was headed back for India in October 1909, but a number of events happened to frustrate his ambition. In London, he came to be closely associated with the India House radicals. In particular, he came under the sway of V.D. Savarkar, who at that time was a proponent of the cult of violence. He glorified the cult of violence. In 1909, the anti-British campaign reached its peak in India House, culminating on the 10th of May in an annual celebration of honoring the martyrs of 1857. The emotion-laden and vengeful tones of the speeches and some very charged denunciations of British colonialism motivated this young Indian to take a life, his own contribution to patriotism. At least that is how he saw it. The British judiciary sentenced him to death. News of the assassination reached Gandhi, who was then traveling from South Africa, from the Transvaal to London. And he was overcome with grief, not only because he knew Curzon Wyllie, because by that time of his life, and he was an activist in South Africa, he had come to believe that violence was not only corrupt, it was corrupting, it was sterile. Nothing can come out of violence except violence, and this is something that we will look at subsequently. This deep emotion, this deep reflection on violence had led him to fashion his strategy of satyagraha against the South African regime. Gandhi's rejection of violence was grounded in his deep familiarity with the India House radicals. Whenever he was in London, he made it a point to meet them. And when they dedicated themselves to the one-sided pursuit of violence, Gandhi despaired. At a meeting to honor NEERA, later after he was killed, after he was hanged, the chief spokesman of the India radicals, Savarkar, read out a letter, which again V.N. Datta has said was not authored by NEERA, it was authored by Savarkar. But the letter read, "The only lesson required for India in present is to learn how to die, and the only way to teach it is by dying ourselves. Therefore I die, glorying in my martyrdom." And Gandhi was again overcome by despair, and this despair motivated him to write Hind Swaraj. Hind Swaraj, written on board the ship that carried Gandhi back to South Africa, was, as he remarked later, his answer to the Indian prototype, Indian defense of violence. I, continued Gandhi, came in touch with every known radical in London. They were brave, their bravery impressed me, but I felt their zeal was misguided. I felt that violence was no remedy for India's ills, and that her civilization required a different instrument for self-realization. And that is, of course, he found in Hindu and Jain tradition, his defense of non-violence. And this he felt was necessary because revolutionary terrorists of the revolutionary nationalists of the late 19th and early 20th century had used the Bhagavad Gita to actually justify violence. And Gandhi thought the Bhagavad Gita had to be rescued. Now, to locate the text Hind Swaraj in a context, so let us briefly look at the period which followed 1857. The British adopted a policy of reprisals, which was designed to humiliate Indians, to hammer them into submission and take away their agency. There is a very interesting book which is written by Christopher Herbert, and he talks about the way the British extracted revenge from all the people who had participated in the 1857 revolt. He talks of a brigadier, later General, James O'Neill, who came to be known for the ferocious retribution that he extracted upon mutineers and their suspected sympathizers. Neil, who commanded Kanpur at the time of the revolt, had designed this innovative way of humiliating Indians. So we are told of the way that Indian mutineers who had been part of the 1857 revolt, on their way to the gallows, was forced to kneel and lick a spot which was stained with the blood of Britishers. Their own appalling form of humiliation and pollution suffered by an upper caste Hindu, which was apparently most of the sepoys were upper caste Hindus. During the late 1870s, resentment began to be built up against this open policy of reprisals open violence, and the scant respect that British had for educated Indians, particularly their critique of economic exploitation. And you know, one is reminded of Frantz Fanon, who writes 50 years later in the context of Algeria, in the context of immense violence. And Fanon begins, I'm not saying he's an advocate of violence, in fact he's known as a defender of violence, but he goes on to say something else completely different. He talks about how colonialism is stamped with the cloven hoof of violence. This generates all kinds of pathologies, a propensity to be violent upon people who are more vulnerable than you. And he says the one question the colonized ask in the face of this brutality is, who am I? Who am I? I have lost all subjectivity. I have lost a sense of myself. And the only way he can recover, writes Fanon, always a he, can recover from this loss of subjectivity is to pick up a gun. Now the sexual metaphor is very clear. Fanon was obviously he was a psychiatrist, he was very influenced by Freud. And the only way they can do it is to pick up the gun and aim the barrel at the British. Violence against colonial power, and Fanon was right, foregrounded a sense of common destiny, a common enemy, a sense of brotherhood. And it liberated Indians from their feeling of inferiority. It seemed to have restored their self-respect. This was precisely the sentiment that had moved NEERA. Brought up in an atmosphere of chilling colonial brutality, he was convinced that you have to use violence. On the day of his execution, 17th August 1909, a letter was found in his apartment, along with a reproduction of a painting by a Russian painter, in which was shown Indians being blown off the cannon. If I'm not mistaken, that cannon is still there in Old Lahore, in the Secretariat, where Indians were blown off, Indian mutineers were blown off. And a portrait of Lord Curzon, upon which was written "Heathen Dog." Now NEERA writes, and this is where we and Datta say this was not written by him, this was written by Savarkar, who engaged in the most cynical justification of violence during 1957. He actually glamorized whatever was done to the British. But let us assume NEERA wrote it. I attempted to shed English blood, he writes, as a humble revenge for the inhuman hangings and deportations of patriotic Indian youths. In this attempt, I have consulted nobody but my own conscience. I believe a nation held down by foreign bayonets is in a perpetual state of war. Since the open battle is rendered impossible to a disarmed race, I attacked by surprise. Since the guns I denied to me, I took up my pistol and I fired. Poor in wealth and intellect, a son like me has nothing else to offer to his mother but his own blood, which I have sacrificed at her altar. Armed with the conviction that only violence could counteract the violence of colonialism, a number of organizations grew up in North and in Eastern India, and also Tamil Nadu, of course Bengal, Maharashtra, but also parts of Punjab and Tamil Nadu. You had akharas, you had gymnasiums, all dedicated to the recovery of manhood, all dedicated to create a muscular group of young Indian men. Russia, with its tradition of nihilistic violence, became the favorite destination, as did Ireland. The trajectory of violence was initiated in June 1997 in Maharashtra when two brothers, the Chapekar brothers, shot dead W.C. Rand, the plague commissioner of Pune, and Lieutenant Charles Egerton, IRS, an officer of the administration. Apparently they showed, whatever I have read, they showed complete insensitivity to all the sensitivities of Indians. They would walk into private quarters, into women quarters on the pretext of wiping out plague. Now both these officers were held responsible for the excesses that were inflicted upon Indians during the course of checking the plague in Pune. Penning his biography in jail, Damodar Chapekar wrote, "There was a plague in the Bombay presidency, an earthquake in Calcutta, and a terrible famine all over the country. Our Shastras tell us that the ruler is like a father, the queen is like a mother, that means. But actually there is no reason why she should not be called a female fiend who devours her own progeny. That is why we tried to kill the symbols of the British crown." This act was to spark off a wave of revolutionary movement. Now it's interesting that the revolutionary terrorists who dedicated themselves to the spilling of blood did not bother to create a mass movement. That was left for Gandhi. They did not bother to mobilize people. They did not bother to bring a sense of politics. They were acting alone, which makes, as I will argue in the last part of the talk, violence a spectacle. And everybody else is reduced to an audience. They are not participants. They do not make their own history. Nobody has called upon people to make their own history. They just watch while these revolutionaries perform spectacular acts of violence. So Bal Gangadhar Tilak was called by Valentine Shirol of London Times as the father of Indian unrest. Lajpat Rai said the tree of freedom demands blood. But these defenses pale in comparison when you compare it with the cynical defense of 1857 by V.D. Savarkar of retribution and of revenge, describing in harrowing detail whatever Indian soldiers did to the British. Savarkar termed them as acts of holy ritual. Without violence, he said, you cannot create society. The only alternative is to take away cricket bats from your children and give them guns. The partition of Bengal, of course, heightened this whole wave of violence and justification that was unleashed on India. The language of violence had become common currency. And it is in this particular context that Gandhi embarks upon the project of denouncing violence in a very limited sense and actually justifying non-violence. His first attack was on NEERA. He's a misguided patriot. And he asks the interlocutor, he said, do you not tremble by freeing India by assassination? His first defense of non-violence was that violence is not the answer, it leaves stigmata. Just like Lady Macbeth's hands were stained with the blood of Duncan, what never will never these hands be clean? If your colonial rule is violence, if nationalism is violence, you're going to get a violent post-colonial society, and nobody understands this better than Frantz Fanon. Violence, according to Gandhi, is neither pragmatic nor productive. For all its heroism and daredevilry, it is actually a lazy way of doing politics. It eschews transformation of the body politic, of its members. Spectacular violence reduces people, potential citizens, to spectators. In the process, nothing changes, nothing ever could. Gandhi's attack on violence, as exemplified in Dhingra's act in killing a British official, was based upon pragmatism. In a public meeting in Calcutta in 1920, he said, has Indians ever won by using violence? You cannot win by using violence. I would not want the yoke of a government that has emasculated us to continue, but I would urge that Indians should not use violence. But even if this happened, even if freedom was won with torn feet and bloodied hands, people would never realize what is rightfully theirs. It would never come into her own. That is the country. His idea that India had something very special and that is the ability to realize substantive freedom. I'm a bit skeptical about this idea of Swaraj because I don't think everybody is quite defined what is Swaraj, but it's very clear what Gandhi meant. He meant substantive freedom. When violence becomes the architect of history, Gandhi went on to say, it replaces oppression by oppression. Those who will rise to murder, this is Gandhi, will not make the nation happy. Those who believe that Dhingra actually emancipated the Indians make a serious mistake. Dhingra was a patriot. His love was blind. He gave his body in a wrong way. His ultimate result can only be mischievous. I think we have a lot to learn from this pragmatic defense of non-violence. Why we should be non-violent? Because violence leads to reproduction of the barren concept of violence, the practices of violence. Secondly, Gandhi was of the firm belief that violence is not something you pick up and discard. And I think we in India have become very conscious of how violence has become the new normal. Violence sucks you into a quagmire. From here, there is no escape. When violence holds individuals in thrall, moral disintegration follows. And Gandhi goes on to say, in my view, Dhingra was innocent. The murder was committed in a state of intoxication. It is not merely wine or bhang that makes one drunk. A mad idea can do so. This was the case with Dhingra. In fact, I think Dhingra, it has been reported by many historians, did consume bhang before murdering this gentleman. More significantly, he said, violence as politics belongs to the realm of illusion. You might blame people for acts of violence, but the masses will remain untouched and steeped in passivity as mere audience. And this kind, it's very interesting how Gandhi's notion of the satyagrahi approximates Lenin's notion of the vanguard. That you have to go and light a spark in the minds of people. People are not going to be moved. At least go and inspire them. You tell them what violence is about, what colonialism is about. And in a way, this kind of a job had to be performed by the satyagrahi. He had to arouse the slumbering conscience of a large number of people. Now, it's very interesting. Gandhi sees society as the individual writ large. We say in political theory, philosophy tells you how to lead a good life. Political philosophy tells you you cannot lead a good life unless you live in a good society. How can you be non-violent in a society where violence has become the new normal? Most importantly, apart from the pragmatic defense of non-violence, Gandhi made two kinds of arguments which spoke about non-violence. Why should we embrace ahimsa? That is the question. I mean, I'm no hagiographer, and I don't think we should now engage in more hagiographies of Gandhi said this, Gandhi said that. He told us why we should be non-violent. The first argument is epistemological. Why should we engage? Why should we renounce violence and adopt non-violence? Violence is always stems from the conviction that I am right, you are wrong. And when you face another fellow citizen, or anybody, another human being, face to face, with violent tools, you do not regard him as a human being, you regard him as a thing. Violence dehumanizes social relations. It dehumanizes the possibility of regarding each other as human beings who, as Marx said, are bearers of commodities. We should recognize each other as humans. But violence actually kills our capacity to treat others, who may well be the stranger, as certain people who are human and who deserve to be treated with all the dignity that being human commands. Great historical injustices have been committed, and this we get an idea from Gandhi's support of non-violence, because of the conviction that we are right, everybody else is wrong. You don't know what the truth is. Think of the Crusades. think of the violence that is being perpetuated on our own fellow citizens because you don't follow the path that is being laid down to you, for you. In a way, violence desensitizes human beings, and in a way, religious wars which uphold one truth against all falsities of the truth have proved that violence cannot help to build up a good society within which an individual can realize his nature, his true nature. And Gandhi said very clearly, I have been striving to learn, I've been striving to know what is the truth. If I can know the truth, I would jump from the Himalayas. But I know I cannot know the truth. Because the full truth can never be known, and truth stood for him as a synonym for justice, for knowing how to behave, for knowing how to treat your fellow human beings. Now it's very interesting how Gandhi in this argument, the epistemological argument, was influenced by two theorists, or two philosophers. One was Socrates, the other was John Locke. He translated Plato's play, The Apology, which deals with Socrates' trial, into Gujarati. And this is exactly the kind of argument Socrates makes. He was asked by the Athenian jury of big men, why do you stop and talk to people on the path? And Socrates said, you know, a friend of mine, Chaerephon, went to the oracle at Delphi and asked the oracle, who was the wisest man in Athens? And the goddess said, Socrates. Socrates said, I knew he was wrong because I'm not the wisest man in Athens. But I have to prove the goddess is wrong. So he started stopping people, philosophers and astronomers and all kinds of, dramatists and literary people, and asking them questions. By the end of it, he says, I know I had more knowledge than them. They don't even know they don't know. At least I know I don't know. That awareness of the limits, that you can never know the truth, is what makes us human. John Locke in the 17th century was to make the same argument in his essay on toleration. Two kinds of knowledge. Knowledge which is born out by experiment, and knowledge of revelation. Now, I cannot know why you believe the way you do. It's a religion, it's a conversation between you and your God. How can I denounce you for not believing in the way I think you should believe? You should leave people alone. I think these arguments need to be highlighted at a time when we are being told how to believe, what to believe, how to treat other fellow citizens. Gandhi used exactly the same kind of argument. There may be a truth somewhere out there, but all of us can be but seekers after the truth. The truth is like, the famous elephant and the 5 men who tried to figure out what the elephant was. They were an elephant, but they gave different versions of the elephant. If that is so, if the truth of Raja Harishchandra is not the truth of your truth, then we have to search for the truth together. And that would mean that we enter into a conversation. We are seekers after the truth, and this should allow us to moderate our pretensions that we know all there is to know about knowledge. Now, in a way, Gandhi talks about an epistemological lack, that human beings cannot know what is true, and this becomes the base for his argument of non-violence, because how can you be violent if you don't even know that what you are doing and what you are sowing is the infinite truth? And if that is so, you have to be tolerant, and to be tolerant you cannot be violent. You have to be very aware of this lack. The final argument that Gandhi makes in defense of non-violence is the ontological argument. The Western tradition sees individuals as moral beings. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But Gandhi thinks this is based upon a separate, and this is based upon a notion that human beings are discrete and separate from each other. We owe each other because each of us possesses a moral status, and this status enables us to be treated with respect. Gandhi eschews the idea that human beings are separate. Steeped in the tradition of Advaita or non-dualism, Gandhi argued that those who hurt others hurt themselves. or that we harm a part of ourselves when we harm others, because they are ourselves in a different form. And if you read Gandhi, he not only talks about the community, he not only talks about the nation, he talks about the world, he talks about the global community. If others represent us in a different form, then their welfare is bound up with ours. I do not believe that one individual can gain spiritually and those who surround him can suffer. I believe in Advaita. I believe in the essential unity of man, and for that matter, for all lives. You cannot have one human being suffering while others do not suffer. Not only is the construction of division between human beings, or the forging of the notion of us versus them, highly arbitrary, this construction is harmful. This becomes clear the moment we start wondering what harming another person means. What does it do to our moral personalities? We diminish as persons when we practice violence. Once again, the rejection of violence, the doctrine of non-violence, wreaks a transformation in the way people approach each other. The rejection of violence leads to a negation of violence and the adoption of non-violence. Gandhi negates violence because he saw it incapable of bringing about freedom that human beings needed, because it presupposes a flawed notion of the truth, and because it ultimately harms the perpetrator. These are the three arguments that Gandhi makes. Of course, I have extracted from Gandhi. He doesn't make them in quite this manner, but it is possible to read Gandhi, and I'm sure other people have read Gandhi differently. And then they are having to what Ashok Vajpayee started the introduction with. It is not as if Gandhi sees things in black and white, or conceptualizes violence in opposition to non-violence. There were times when violence is preferable to non-violence, and this is particularly when in terms of cowardice. I'd rather have India resort to arms than in order to defend her honor, or that she should behave in a cowardly manner and remain a helpless witness to her own subordination. The choice of non-violence is therefore preferable to violence, but violence may be necessary, and he outlines two conditions in which violence may be necessary. The first is when somebody has to be killed because killing him would avert harm. Think of somebody who's holding up a bus of school children. Now, killing him might be necessary. You only hope that they don't kill him, they only injure him or incapacitate him in some time. But it may be necessary in order to say, not in a very strictly utilitarian argument, but utilitarianism has its uses. The second argument he gives us, suppose a friend of mine is suffering and I help her to liberate her soul. As long as I do it unselfishly, I don't hope to gain anything from her death. I help her escape pain. Violence may be permissible. And this brings me to the concluding part of the talk. You see, among theories of violence, and I want to locate Gandhi in theories of violence, how is violence defined? It is defined in three ways. It is defined in terms of force, it is defined in terms of harm, and it is defined in terms of intention. Now, you can have violence without force. And the most illustrative story is that of the Sphinx and Oedipus. When Oedipus comes trailing onto the gates of Thebes, there is a Sphinx sitting there who is being sent by the gods to punish the people of Thebes. And she asks a riddle. It's well known. What animal is this that walks on 4 legs during childhood, 2 legs during adulthood, and 3 legs when they're older? And Oedipus says, man. He's already killed his father without knowing that that is his father, and is well on his way to getting married to his own mother, because that is fate. That is the beauty of Greek epics. It tells us nobody is going to win, everybody is going to lose by the end. So be careful about what you do. There are no winners or losers. Life is just a series of dilemmas. And the Sphinx is so shocked that he has given her a correct reply that she jumps off and dies. But this must be the only case in history where somebody is killed because of somebody else being able to answer a quiz. But in a way, there is no force. But she dies. So force may not be the defining form of violence. The second definition of violence hinges on harm. Harm can be caused without force. Think of a storm which wreaks everything in its path, which destroys everything in its path. You know, you have this famous issue, in a way, example of causality. There's a storm, a tree branch breaks, that branch hurls it into your window. It hits the window fragments. A sliver of glass goes and hurts your TV, injures the TV explodes and you get injured. Now where is the causality? There is no intention. Storms wreak everybody who is in their path. The defining moment of violence is intention. If I have intended to kill somebody, or injure somebody, I am culpable because I have made a choice. And Gandhi was very clear. Human beings can make choices. And making the right choice makes you human. Right? Making the wrong choice can lead on the path of destruction. Now, the moment somebody makes a choice to injure other people, he or she is to be blamed. He or she is culpable. Whereas harm can be inflicted, as we have seen, by a storm, or by somebody slamming a car door not knowing that your hand is on the jamb, or on the jamb rather. Yes? In a way, these other two aspects of violence, definition of violence, force and harm, may be the wrong ways to think of violence. It is intention. And the intention to wreak violence is the product of a moral choice. And Gandhi tells us violence is not outside the ambit of normativity. It is possible, it is a product of a moral choice. Therefore, we have the right to criticize those who adopt violence as a means to many other things, apart from his other criticism that violence as a mode of politics reduces audiences to a bystander, to an audience. It does not invite them into history. It becomes violence as spectacle. Thank you.
Take some questions and comments. Questions and comments.
Thank you. Yes, sure.
Well, friends, you have heard Professor Chandhoke. Now is the time for you to offer brief comments or ask questions. And as I have said many times, brevity remains the soul of wit. So ask brief questions, give small comments if at all. Go ahead, yes. And the mic will come to you, so please wait.
I might be heard better if I stand.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Chandhoke, for sort of throwing fresh light on a theme about which everybody writes. You mentioned about the pragmatic considerations in favor of non-violence. I just want to add one more. If India had chosen violence, that is terrorism, then we should also bear in mind we are in 2019, and in 1919 all those who were killed in Jallianwala Bagh, they were shot at by Indians. There was of course a British commander. In other words, if India had chosen violence, there would have been enough Indians to kill the Indians who fight against the British. Now, I just want to ask you a question. And you said that those who practice violence, well, they think that they know what is right, and they alone know what is right. Well, Probably, but let us look at Algerian independence. That was an armed struggle from 1954 till 1962. 300,000, that was a grim toll. 2 million displaced and all that. Now, in that case, the Algerians who fought against France, well, they had an aim, they had a noble goal. We can't say that, they held, that they alone knew what is right. So, I think there are circumstances where violence is called for, and while we may, of course, sort of emphasize the importance of India's freedom struggle based mostly on non-violence, when you look at history as a whole, violence has at times good reasons to be there. So I think we have to look at it a little more historically. Now, the last observation, if I may, and I'm going to conclude, is that while we at the IIC discuss all this, as Ashok ji pointed out, what is happening in our country is taking us further and further from Gandhi. We should bear in that mind. So, my question is, does it make any difference what we discuss here, as regards the course of India is concerned?
Yeah. Algeria is probably the only case of an urban guerrilla struggle. Whenever the term urban Nakshal is used, I always think of Algeria, because if you've seen Porticovo's Battle for Algiers, or Have Algiers, for Algiers, it would be a case of urban Nakshals, in our words. But if you read Fanon, he was very clear that violence is important for realizing subjectivity, but after a point, politics has to constrain violence. And that's exactly what Mao said. That revolutionary warfare is not about violence, it is about politics. You have to really politicize people. And I think the best example of politicization of a very poor, underdeveloped country was Amilcar Cabral in Guinea-Bissau. He would start off by going to the farmers and saying, "Father, why don't you have bread, chicken on your plate?" And they would start off talking about, and he built up the finest army. Portugal had a coup d'etat because of the struggle in France, of struggle in Guinea-Bissau. Now, in a way, when violence goes berserk, when it is no longer controlled by politics, when it doesn't have the chance to be controlled by politics, you have the spectacle of passivity. Che Guevara did not believe in politics controlling violence. He did not make, I have a lot of debates with my friends who are defenders of, they're all defenders of Che. We all wear t-shirts using Che's photograph. I knew you were in that. Well, the point is, he did not believe in this distinction between a political force and a guerrilla army. Before he died, Chalian has recorded this. The night before he died, he entered into his diary, "Not a single peasant has joined my struggle." He couldn't mobilize people because he felt that Foucault theory, you spark of violence, the government will retaliate, people will become radicalized. So in a way, Algeria was an example of people regaining selfhood. And what colonialism did to them is still being shown in our postmodern theories. Of all the Algerian philosophers who went to France and who became philosophers of violence. In a way, the moment you stop controlling politics, you have chaos, because you land up with passivity on the one hand, and you land up without any control. And that is why, secondly, is Gandhi still relevant? It doesn't matter. We should stop desanctifying Gandhi. Stop seeing him as a saint. See him as a philosopher who gave you some answer to the eternal dilemmas of the human condition. That is the mark of a philosopher. It's not to give answers. It's to say, look, life is a dilemma, make a moral choice. The making of moral choices is only possible in a society That is by certain standards a decent society or a good society. Therefore, political theory. You cannot lead a good life unless you have a good society. And a good society is not telling you, this is right, this is wrong. A good society is allowing you, is enabling you to make the right choices. Because you are, after all, responsible for the choices you make. That is why Gandhi is relevant. The idea that people choose violence over non-violence is for him a damning indictment of the kind of society you have. He's not happy about defending violence. He has to do it because he's in a colonial situation. That's it.
Yes.
Yes, madam, I think Gandhi was very much influenced by Gita. The whole story go by Mahabharata. Then there is a main character Krishna, where he teaches or preaches us, if you are killing someone, nobody is your friend or relative or anything, you are doing it for your dharma.
Yes.
So in the name of dharma, can anybody kill anyone?
Yes. Well, the Mahabharata is a very good example of what happens when there is war. Because by the end of it, Yudhishthira said, I cannot govern this country. Everyone is dead. I mean, who's left? There is a very interesting poem in which Subhadra says to Krishna, who is left except old men to govern this country? So in a way, Mahabharata is like the Greek. All epics tell you there are no neat solutions to the human condition. Every choice you make has its tragedies. Be prepared, make the right choices. So Gandhi used, I think, Gita not mechanically, not as a series of guidelines you give your corporate friends, which many writers have reduced the Gita to. Do this, don't do this. I mean, we are not following the 10 commandments. We are not that kind of a religion. We are a religion which offers you choices. This is your duty. Should you be doing it? Look at the duty of Yudhishthira. He made unthinking choices. I don't know why he's considered Dharamraj.
Yes. Here.
I mean, he chose.
No, please.
He chose to say Ashwatthama is dead. It led to the death of Dronacharya. Ashwatthama went crazy, killing everybody in the Pandav household. And then he was banned, he was condemned to float between heaven and earth. I mean, a series of tragedies because of unintelligent choices. I think Mahabharata tells you, be very careful about the choices you make. That's what I have to say. I don't think we should be interpreting them mechanically as a series of propositions that we should be following.
In terms of the philosophical origins or the thinking of Mahatma Gandhi and, let's say, the antithetical philosophical stream of violence, I'm just wondering, can you trace Gandhiji's philosophy to any particular text or any philosophical thinking tradition in Indian culture, and likewise the others who are antithetical to him in terms of their philosophy of violence, for example, what kind of origin do their thinking trace it back to in terms of our culture? Thank you.
You know, this Indian culture business has always bothered, I think, academics or people at least who are critical. What does being immersed in your own culture mean? You are Anantamurthy's famous book, Sanskar, right?
Yes.
Pranishcharya is a very knowledgeable man. He's steeped in Indian Hindu culture, he's steeped in the Vedas, he's steeped in every possible scripture known to Hinduism. And when a renegade Brahmin dies, he doesn't know what to do. His culture gives him absolutely no help in making intelligent choices. There's a dead body lying there because the Brahmins say you cannot cremate this man in the same place where other Brahmins are cremated. People don't cook because you don't cook if there's a dead body lying somewhere. There is plague, there is chaos, and this man cannot make an intelligent decision. Now, what is the use of culture to him? What is the use of culture or your Vedas or your Upanishads or your various scriptures if you cannot even make intelligent choices? Because then you realize life is not a series of neat situations, life's a dilemma. When you are confronted with a dilemma, you take care to make the right choices. So in a way, this Indian culture has never impressed me because your notion of culture can cripple your imagination to make intelligent decisions, and we all are capable of making intelligent decisions, provided we have a society that lets us make intelligent decisions. All we want is the right to make our own decisions, because I think we're all mature, most of us. Yes? Now, if somebody is stupid enough to gamble away his property like Devdas, you owe no responsibility to him. But you owe responsibility to people who are poor because they have been born into a poor family. There is a difference between choice and circumstance. वो तो आना चाहिए हम लोगों को फर्क. We're treating everybody as if, you give them enough income and everybody will be happy. That's not the way you approach the human condition. The human condition is very complicated and we need to be reflective human beings to think. That is why we're very skeptical of ideologies. That actually prevents you.
Be brief, huh? Because we are running again. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your very deep,
How are you?
Okay,
Yeah.
leave that. Go
very
ahead.
deep engagement. Now, with respect, the relationship between history and philosophy and life project is complex. I just wish to draw our attention to partition of Bengal and the Swadeshi movement. And that movement, the Swadeshi movement, had a very complex relationship with violence, non-violence, including mass politics. So therefore, my submission is that violence, this disjunction between violence and mass politics that you are proposing, maybe needs a rethinking. Because some kinds of qualified violence, as it happened during the Swadeshi movement, and I have your mind Sri Aurobindo and Gandhi and their differing interpretation of Gita. During Quit India movement also, Gandhi was not totally opposed to violence and it involved mass politics. But in terms of intentionality of violence, I think that's a very deep thought. If violence is structured by intentionality, so is non-violence. And it is in that spirit, the epistemological dimension and of course the multi-valued logic of the Jains, the Anekantavada, I would like to submit. Therefore, moving from violence to non-violence, vis-a-vis intentionality requires a kind of cultivation. What kind of body, mind we can cultivate, which can support this journey from violence to non-violence.
I'll make a very quick response because we are running out of time. Two questions. Should
Yes.
I answer?
No, please.
Very quickly. Which philosopher in history which philosopher do you know who has not addressed his historical condition? Even an opaque philosopher like Hegel was addressing the problems of modernity. Of course they have to address history. John Donne says the task of a political theory is to address practical problems and tell us how to solve them. Now we may not know how to solve them, at least we are identifying them. So in a way, every philosopher is historically constituted from Socrates onwards to M.K. Gandhi or the current philosophers, whoever they are. So that is the first question, the first answer to that philosophy and history are not so separated. Every philosopher has to be, all of us have to be good historians. We have to know where we've come from. How will we know where we are unless we know where we've come from? That is the first answer. The second answer is, yes, people move to non-violence as Aurobindo did, as a matter of conscious choice. And that is the morality. You see, but the question is not that you have to be non-violent, ahimsa follow karo, ye karo, wo Gandhian bano. We have to know why we have to be non-violent. And that is where Gandhi gives us the answer.
Yeah, last question.
What
Yes.
if
A gentleman there who...
Huh? अच्छा ओके
गांधी टोपी.
What if Gandhi was in a time machine
Yes.
and rather than come back to India in 1916, came back 100 years later, in 2016 or perhaps even in June after this election? What do you think Gandhi would do now?
What is that?
would do now.
If he came today.
I don't get the question.
What if Gandhi came via time machine rather than in 1916, in 2016, 100 years later, or perhaps today, after the most recent election? What would Gandhi do?
I've just said we cannot know where we are unless we know our past. Right? He helps us understand our past. I'm not saying the task of a philosopher is to give eternal answers to eternal questions. The questions might remain the same, the answers are different. The genius of a philosopher is identifying the right question. The same question was asked by Socrates and the same by John Rawls in 1971, what is justice? They gave two different answers. The genius of identifying the question of our time is what makes a philosopher relevant for us. Your answer will be different. Prashn to puchna shuru karo. That ability to critically think through the human condition is what a good society gives to its people. And any regime which truncates your ability to ask these questions is not a decent, good society. I'm not using good in the Rousseauist sense. Or even in the Gandhian sense, everybody should follow Swaraj. I mean, what is Swaraj? Everybody should follow what they think is intelligently possible. But at least learn to ask the right question. वो सवाल पूछना, वो प्रश्न पूछना. The genius of our society lies in that. And it's very difficult to ask the right question when you're surrounded by cheerleaders, by darbaris. जो आपको प्रश्न भी नहीं पूछने देते हैं. प्रश्न तो पूछना शुरू करो. And remember, a society that ceases asking question decays. That's what happened to Christianity in the 1,000 years. That's why Greece was an ancient civilization, because they learned how to ask questions. So prashn puche, what kind of question we should ask is what a philosopher does. The philosopher that doesn't ask the right question is not of interest to me. Why would an early Savarkar be of interest to me when he's glorifying violence? That's it. Ji.
बापू ने अपने जीवन का निचोड़ कहा है कि मेरी राष्ट्र सेवा मेरी आध्यात्मिक साधना है, जिसके द्वारा मैं अपनी आत्मा को शरीर के बंधन से मुक्त करना चाहता हूँ। मेरे लिए मोक्ष का मार्ग निखिल मानव की सेवा और स्वदेश का मार्ग है। मेरी यात्रा सनातन शांति की ओर है और देशभक्ति उस यात्रा का सिर्फ एक अंग है।
प्रश्न पूछे। हाँ।
जी
हाँ, पूछिए।
प्रश्न के सिलसिले में ही ये बात आ रही है कि जो इसी बात को भगवान ने 7वें अध्याय में कहा, भगवान श्री कृष्ण ने, कि बहु नाम जन्म नाम अंते ज्ञानवान माम प्रपद्यते वासुदेवा सर्वमिति स महात्मा स दुर्लभा। जो महात्मा गांधी की जो परिभाषा है उस अध्याय में मिलती है कि कई जन्मों के बाद में जब 4 प्रकार के मेरे भक्त होते हैं, उसमें ज्ञानी को जब ये ज्ञान हो जाता है कि सभी कारणों का कारण मैं हूँ, ऐसा जो महात्मा है वो अत्यंत दुर्लभ होता है। क्योंकि वो दुर्लभ होता है और उसके सारे कर्म जो है दिव्यत्व से प्रभावित होते हैं। तो जब दिव्य कर्मों को हम साधारण दृष्टि से देखने का प्रयास करते हैं तो उसमें भ्रांतियां उत्पन्न होती हैं, जो एक बहस का एक मुद्दा है। जैसे कि हम पिछली बार मथुरा की बात मैं कर रहा था कि जब पहली गिरफ्तारी भारत में होती है 9 अप्रैल को, तो उस समय जब उनको गिरफ्तार किया था पलवल के स्टेशन पे, तो उनके सीने में दर्द हो रहा है, बापू के सीने में दर्द है और वो भूखे भी हैं। तो लेकिन जब वो सेपरेशन की बात आई, महादेव देसाई और वो अलग हो रहे हैं, तो उन्होंने जो बास्टर्ड दिया भोजन कि भाई फलों का एक टोकरा था, तो उनका ये हमको इसको रख लेते क्योंकि जिस पुलिस ऑफिसर ने मुझे गिरफ्तार किया है उसकी सेवा के लिए हमने रखी। दूसरी बात, मैं खत्म कर दूं यहाँ पे,
प्रश्न नहीं पूछ रहे हैं, प्रश्न पूछे।
हाँ जी, तो अब ये मैं जानना चाहता हूँ कि ये इतना बड़ा ये एरा है 1919 का, जिसके बारे में 100 साल हो रहे हैं, उसमें जब आप एस्प्लेनेड में मैदान में 2 लाख लोग इकट्ठे हुए हैं, उधर मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना जो है उधर 1.5 लाख बॉम्बे में हुए हैं। 9 अप्रैल को ये हो रहा, 13 अप्रैल को जलियांवाला हो रहा है। इतिहास में इन बातों को उस तरीके से क्यों नहीं पढ़ाया गया, दिखाया गया, दर्शाया गया, जिसकी वजह से सब छिपा हुआ है?
मेरे पास जवाब है। थैंक यू, मेहरबानी आपने। मैं आपको अब वो युग और था, आजकल ये हाल है, वो है ना वो इश्क में रही गर्मियां, ना वो हुस्न में रही शोखियां, ना वो गजल ही में तड़प रही, ना वो खम है जुल्फे अयाज में। मौसम बदल गया, अब क्या करें? तो वी हैव टू कंटेम्पोराइज गांधी। हमें वो सवाल पूछने चाहिए गांधी की फिलोसफी से, और वो प्रश्न उठाने चाहिए जो हमारे युग के लिए उचित है।
This is the last one.
Well, you just said it, we have to contemporize Gandhi. So, from a political theory position, I'm saying, not otherwise, in a very technical sense. So we have to, perhaps this is the context within which new arguments for non-violence, within new context, new articulations of non-violence, for example, is required. In which way do you think it's going to affect our political theory?
आप लोग हैं ना? So new argument, we do, you, everyone sitting here, we expect to see a lot of new arguments. Rajesh has just done a PhD on Gandhi and Kant. I mean, प्रश्न उठाइए. What is the most relevant question for today? Why should we be non-violent? Am I right?
Yeah.
Do you have a different question? Thank you.
हमारे एक दोस्त थे, वो कहते थे प्रश्न पूछो, प्रश्न का उत्तर न पूछो। और या मेरी तरह हर प्रश्न का उत्तर इतना लंबा दो कि जिसने पूछा है उसी को याद न रहे। बहरहाल, thank you very much, Professor Chandhoke, for a brilliant presentation and for all of you to be there. On Monday evening at 6:30 at the same place, we will have a Smriti Sabha for Girish Karnad, who died recently. So those of you who are interested in one of the most outstanding figures of our time, please do come. Thank you.
Monday. 6:30 downstairs. No?
Monday, the next Monday. एक और सूचना ये है, परसों यानी इतवार की शाम को 6:30 बजे टी.एम. कृष्णा, जो कर्नाटक के बड़े संगीतकार हैं, उनकी एक बातचीत है नीलाभ मिश्र स्मृति व्याख्यान में। तो आप में से जो लोग जानते हैं कि टी.एम. कृष्णा इज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट आउटस्टैंडिंग म्यूजिशियन, बट ऑल्सो वेरी वोकल म्यूजिशियन, काइंड ऑफ अ पब्लिक musician in that sense. So you are most cordially invited. Make it to Jawahar Bhavan, which is near what? Shastri Bhavan. Near Shastri Bhavan.
Press Club.
Okay. Politically